Hi, this is Martha Sechler from the Brown County Public Library. You know, every day we are making stories. Some stories we forget about right away, like using some glue on a piece of paper. But some days, those stories become something more, like when your little sister got a hold of it and put the glue in her hair. There's a story for you. Or maybe a story like your dad couldn't get to the barber and he really needed a haircut, and so he handed you the clippers. That could be an interesting story. At any rate, the stories that are happening to us, the things that are happening to us, make an impression. And if they do that, you can turn those into stories. Because when you tell other people stories or you write down those stories, you're sharing a part of yourself, getting to know yourself better, and sharing yourself with others. That's what stories are all about. Now, the story I have today is a story that comes from northern India. It was told to David Novak, a storyteller, and he wrote it down. I read it, I liked it, and now I'm going to share it with you. Many, many years ago, there lived a king. He was wise, and he was very intelligent, and he was very clever. He loved solving puzzles. And he would always ask the people around him if they had heard any new riddles or any puzzles for him to solve. He so enjoyed that. But after a while, people weren't giving him anything new to try. And so he sent out a decree throughout the land, and he said that he was looking for puzzles, looking for riddles to solve, and if people would please send them to him. Not long after that, he received a package in the mail. And in that package were 3 dolls. At first, the king was a little disappointed because he figured that what he had to do was tell these dolls apart because they all look alike. And yes, indeed, that's what it was for. But he couldn't tell them apart. He looked front and back, up and down, all around, and he could not tell them apart. They were exactly alike, as far as he could tell. Well, he got kind of frustrated with that, and he began thinking, maybe I need a little help with this. And he thought to himself, now, a good king, a wise king, keeps counselors at his side to help him make decisions. Now, I have a wise man. I'm going to call him in on this. And so he sent for the wise man to come and see him. And when the door opened and the wise man walked in, he talked, he mumbled, and he walked very slowly with, dust motes sort of flittering around his head. He walked so slowly the dust just settled on him. But when he got to the king, he bowed and said, Your Majesty, what can I do for you today? Well, said the king, I have a riddle I'd like you to help me solve. All right, said the king. What is it? And so the king pulled out the 3 dolls and showed them to him. And the first thought that the wise man had was, I'm going to spend my time playing with dolls? I could be thinking of such much deeper things. But it was the king that was making this request. And so he looked at the dolls and turned them upside down and looked them all over. And then he handed them back to the king, shaking his head. You can't see any difference, said the king. I'm afraid not. Well, I'm disappointed, said the king. I thought you were wiser than that. The wise man just shook his head and turned around and very slowly walked out of the room. King sat back down and thought for a few minutes. Hey, there's this saying that fools rush in where wise men fear to go. Ha! I have a fool. Send for the fool, he said. And it wasn't long before the door burst open and in came the court jester. He was doing cartwheels, he was doing flips, he was juggling, and when he stopped for a moment at the foot of the king, he said, "Your Majesty, what can I do for you today? Do you want me to juggle for you? You want a magic trick? What is it I can do for you?" "Well," said the king, "you can settle down for a moment." "That's very hard," said the fool. "I know," said the king, "but I need your help." And so the fool listened carefully. And the king pulled out the dolls and showed them to the fool and told him what he wanted him to do. The fool really didn't listen very carefully, picked up the dolls and kind of started playing with them. "What's the difference?" said the king. "Tell me the difference." "Oh, you want them different?" said the fool. So he reached into his pocket and he pulled out 3 hats. A little red hat, a little blue hat, and a little yellow hat. And he put one on the head of each of the dolls. And then he showed them to the king and he said, "Look, 3 dolls. One with a yellow hat, one with a red hat, one with a blue hat. All different." "Oh, you are such a fool," said the king. "Be off with you." And the jester put the little hats back in his pocket and he just strolled off, very dejected. The king felt dejected too. He sat down and he thought and he thought. And then he picked up the little note that came with the 3 dolls and he read it again. Maybe there was something in it that he'd missed the first time. So he read very carefully. "Please tell the difference between these 3 dolls. Tell the difference." I know. Maybe it has something to do with storytelling. And I have a storyteller. So he called for the storyteller to come and see him. Well, the door swept open and she swept in her long sea green gown. And she said, "Oh, Your Majesty, what can I do for you today? Do you need a tale that will uplift you? Do you want one that will make you laugh? Do you need a tale to keep peace? What can I do for you?" "I don't need a story," said the king. "Oh, Your Majesty, everyone needs stories." Yeah, I know. But today I need your help figuring this story out." "Oh, okay," she said. "A riddle? Like the Sphinx?" "Well, not exactly," said the king. "Or like maybe the little man who could spin straw into gold?" "No, not quite like that either," said the king. "Just listen to me for a minute." And so he explained what he wanted her to do. And she picked up the dolls and looked at them, and after a while, she said, "You know, Your Majesty, this reminds me of a story." "Wait, listen. I know you don't want to hear it, but it's a story about 3 chests. Each one looked exactly like the other until you opened them up and looked inside." "Aha," said the king. "I think you're onto something here. So how do you get inside the dolls?" "Well," said the storyteller, "there are many ways to get inside a person's head, but it has been my experience that the most effective way is through the ear." "The ear?" said the king. Like the ear?" "Yes, through the ear. Let me explain." And so she reached out to the king and she plucked one of his long gray hairs in his beard. "That hurt," said the king. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I need it." And so she lifted up the first doll and she took that whisker and she pushed it in the ear of the doll and pushed and pushed and pushed until it was all gone. "Ah," said the storyteller, "this doll, Your Majesty, is a wise man. For you see, whatever he hears, he takes inside, he ponders, and keeps to himself, unless called upon." "All right," said the king. "That's kind of interesting. Tell me about the next doll." So she reached out and she plucked another whisker. "Ouch," said the king. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, it was necessary." And she held up the second doll and she put that whisker into the ear of the second doll and pushed and pushed and pushed. And pretty soon it came out the other side. "Oh," said the storyteller, "this doll is a fool, for what goes in one ear comes right out the other." "Very good," said the king. "Oh, that's excellent. Now what about the third doll?" So she picked up the third doll and the king plucked his own whisker and handed it to her. "Thank you, Thank you. And she picked up that third doll and she pushed and pushed and pushed that whisker right into the ear of the third doll. And after a while, it came out the doll's mouth. Well, this is interesting, said the king. What's this doll? Well, like myself, she's a storyteller. Really, said the king. How do you figure? Well, she listens, and what goes in her ear, she thinks about, she ponders, and then she must share it with others. Oh, I see, said the king. That's the part about coming out the mouth. I've got it. Okay, well, that's wonderful. You helped me solve the problem. Except I have another problem now. And what's that? She said. Well, when you put that whisker in the storyteller's ear, it went in straight, like my whiskers, which are very straight. But when it came out the mouth, it was all curled. Oh, yes, she said. Well, that's because any storyteller worth his or her salt always gives his or her own curl to the story, just as I have put my own curl on the story I just shared with you. Thank you.